disputed election. The election management body in that country says he scored over 60% of the votes in that election. However, this morning, the early hours of this morning, the military in that country was on television declaring that they have taken over. All institutions have been dissolved, and they are taking over the realms of power in that country. Well, what does it mean? Yesterday, we were having a conversation with my guest on the quality of elections on the African continent, and what does that has resulted into. The military on the continent somehow cites that as a reason for interruption of democracy on the continent. This wind, they say, is blowing, and it's blowing really fast. If you get on social media this morning, people are saying, oh, now it's Gabon. It just might be Cameroon next. Would this continue on the African continent, a situation where democracy is interrupted? But then some people say, look, election manipulation is a civilian coup, and until we tackle civilian coups on the continent, we would continue to have this, as many young people across the country are not having it. My guest this morning is an international human rights lawyer, Mr. Kola Alakwini. He's joining us in the conversation this morning. Also, speaking of the politics and the quality of elections that we have, the NNPP yesterday got to a point where they have suspended the national flag, the flag bearer, or the presidential flag bearer of the party in the February 2023 elections. Also, the neck of that party, after the suspension by the BOT, went ahead to suspend the founder of the party and other, members of the party. It's just confusing. What the BOT cited anti-party activities as the reason for suspending the presidential candidate of the party, Senator Kwankwaso. They say he's been meeting up with other politicians, the likes of Atiku, the president, and even Peter Obi, without authorization of the party. And all of this we'll be talking about this morning. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Kola Alakwini. It's a big privilege to have you join us this morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Let's talk about this. Let's begin with the coup in Gabon. The reports came as a shocker to many people, just seeing as how over the weekend they had an election in that country. On Saturday, President Ali Bongo was declared re-elected. Some of the highlights from that election is that internet was shut down. Some media media organizations were not allowed to report the elections. Also, some international observers were blocked from also covering or reporting on the election. What do you make of, what was your first reaction when you heard of the coup in Gabon this morning?
Oh, disappointment. We seem to be fueling the stereotype that we cannot follow the rule of law in Africa. We've always been characterized with, usurping the rule of law. There's no law and order. We don't like to do things by the books. That's the stereotype that you get about countries in Africa when you're abroad. Whether this is rightly or wrongly held opinion, and the jury is out. So I was quite disappointed when I heard about the coup, especially when we have not finished dealing with the one in Niger. And there are various sites or various angles which you can look at this from. If you look at it from the viewpoint of ECOWAS, saying that the rule of law must prevail in Niger, the coup is not going to be tolerated because you cannot keep usurping civil power, and if you're going to effect a change in government, it must be constitutional, and they don't want they don't want to have anything to do with what is happening in Niger by welcoming in the military regime, because they feel it's going to have a ricochet effect. If you now see what has happened in Gabon, you tend to believe ECOWAS's stance. On the other hand, if you listen to what the military are saying in Gabon, that people have been stifled, the voice of people have been stifled, that is why they've come to rescue their government, that would be That is the usual excuse by military governments. But the danger therein lies that when you usurp the power of the people or a democratically elected government and the military comes in, it never, all goes well because they come in with all the lofty promises. Oh, we will do this, we will do that. And they end up being worse than the civilian government which they're trying to remove because the military are not accountable to anybody. And we've seen it time and time happen here in Nigeria. It happened when, Muhammadu Buhari came in, he was deposed or overthrown by palace coup, by his chief of army staff, Ibrahim Babangida. Babangida was there, and corruption even skyrocketed more than it was under the civilians. We put an interim government there. Interim government was annulled, so to speak, by Justice Dolapo Akisanya of the Lagos State High Court. And Abacha wouldn't even wait for the interim government to appeal, because if a judgment has been given at the High Court level, at least you have the chance to appeal to the Court of Appeal or go to the Supreme Court. He just took over. Oh, they've declared the interim government illegal, and we saw what happened with Abacha's rule. So it never all goes well.
Now, I like that you've enumerated and spoken about how the coups never really work well. Military doesn't really have the best interest of its citizens at heart. But then people say that what we've seen across the African continent is a situation where people want to sit tight in office. For instance, the Bongos have been in control and leadership in Gabon for close to six decades now, and people are wondering why this would continue. Just one family, like it's a monarchy. If we're talking about a democracy, shouldn't other people be able to allowed to rule the country? Ali Bongo himself has been there for 2 terms. Now he's going for the 3rd term. Until this putsch, he would have been running. He would have been president for a 3rd term in that country. He's been there for about 13 years. And what does that say about what people refer to as civilian coup, which is not democratic in its real form?
Well, unfortunately, we found ourselves in this unpleasant situation. The Bongo family have been ruling in Gabon for 59 years. Close by to us, Togo was ruled by Nasigbe Yadama for about 32 years or something like that. And then when he passed away, his son also was brought in, and then he is also trying to, stay longer than the elected terms in office. So this is something that we have to deal with by deepening our institutions. The answer is not by an unconstitutional removal of government. We saw that one of our former presidents who was trying to do this, although he's denied it severally, but the National Assembly put an end to it when this former president tried to elongate his term and change the constitution. Let me use what happens internationally as a comparison. Take the United States, for instance, where we